Dawn broke over the shattered French countryside on July 18, 1944. The fields around St. Lo were nothing but a graveyard of twisted steel and scorched hedgerows. Smoke drifted lazily through the morning mist, the stench of burnt fuel mixing with wet earth. From the charred remains of a Sherman tank came a sound, metal groaning, tools clanking, the rasp of a blowtorch cutting through silence. A lone mechanic, face blackened with soot and fury, worked as if possessed. His comrades called him the Mad Mechanic. His real name was Corporal Raymond Red Haskins, a farm boy turned tank fitter who refused to let death have the last word. U.S. 2nd Armored Division log, July 1944. The Sherman before him was a ruin. Tracks blown off, turret jammed, hull riddled by 88mm fire. Any sane man would have left it to rust, but Haskins wasn't sane that morning. He was driven. The 2nd Armored's advance had stalled. German Panther tanks dominated the bocage, their long 75mm guns ripping through Allied armor at ranges the Shermans couldn't touch. Men whispered the Panthers were invincible. Red Haskins spat at the thought. He had watched too many friends burn, so he pulled out his wrench, his acetylene torch, and began to build something the enemy couldn't predict. After-action report, 2nd Armored Maintenance Battalion. Nearby, soldiers paused to watch. The man was a storm of motion, cutting, welding, muttering about balance, recoil, and bite. He scavenged from the dead, armor plates from a wrecked Churchill, a German KWK-40 gun mount stripped from a knocked-out Panzer IV, and spare suspension arms from an M10 tank destroyer. He welded the plates onto the hull's front, doubling its thickness to nearly 120mm at the nose. He reinforced the sides with sandbags and spare track links. "They'll have to earn their shot now," he growled, eyes wild in the glow of his torch. Bureau of Ordnance Field Notes, 1944. The men joked that he was Frankensteining a Sherman, but there was reverence in their laughter. Haskins had been a tractor mechanic before the war, fixing machines with nothing but wire, grease, and grit. Now he was improvising war's deadliest form of survival, innovation under fire. By dusk, the tank had taken shape again, ugly and mean, a jagged creature reborn from war's wreckage. Haskins painted a crude insignia on the turret, a white skull grinning beneath the words, Black Betty. Photographic Archive, U.S. Signal Corps. When Black Betty rolled out that night, her engine coughed and roared like a wounded beast. She wasn't fast, but she was alive. Haskins climbed into the driver's seat himself. He wasn't officially cleared for combat, but permission mattered little now. The column needed a tank, and he had one. As the 2nd Armored pushed towards St. Lo, Betty led the way, steel plates glowing faintly in the fading sun. Unit Morning Report, July 1944. Across the line, German gunners readied their ambush. They had seen the pattern before, Shermans advancing, burning, retreating. But this one moved differently, slower, heavier. In the foggy half-light, the Panthers fired first. 2 shells struck Betty square in the front. The crew braced for the flash. None came, the improvised armor held. Inside, Haskins laughed, a sound half-mad, half-triumphant. He angled the hull, fired back, and watched a tracer streak across the meadow. The shot hit a Panther's flank. A bloom of orange fire lit the hedgerow. Bundesarchive, Panzer Battalion 12 Combat Diary. Word spread through the company. The mechanics monster was fighting back. What began as a desperate repair turned into a legend whispered along the radio net. "That tank ain't dying," someone said. "That tank's haunted." Signal Corps radio transcript, July 1944. For the next 48 hours, Black Betty prowled the front, absorbing punishment and dishing it out with equal fury. Every time she came back for fuel, Haskins and his crew patched her wounds with more scavenged steel. Bits of Panther road wheels, a Kubelwagen's fender, even corrugated barn metal became part of her hide. She looked less like a Sherman now, and more like a myth forged from chaos. Field Workshop Log, 2nd Armored Division. To understand what Haskins achieved, one must understand the hopeless balance of mid-1944 tank warfare. The Sherman M4 was a reliable machine, but undergunned and under-armored against the new German Cats. The Panther's 75mm KWK-42 gun could pierce 100mm of armor at 1,000 meters. The Sherman's 75mm cannon struggled at half that range. The Allies relied on numbers, coordination, and speed. But in the hedgerows, speed was suicide. Every advance became an ambush. Every turn a gamble. U.S. Army Armored Force Report, 1944. The British had tried to answer with the Firefly, mounting the fearsome 17-pounder gun onto the Sherman's frame. But the Americans hadn't yet received enough of them in Normandy. Crews improvised, welding spare armor, hanging sandbags, filling side skirts with concrete. Haskins took that desperation one step further. His beast wasn't a standardized improvement. It was a field-borne revolution. Allied maintenance notes, Normandy sector. In an age where doctrines clashed and supply lines strained, innovation often came from the bottom. Factory engineers designed in comfort. Men like Haskins redesigned in mud and blood. Every plate welded was a prayer for survival. Every bolt tightened was defiance against industrial odds. When generals spoke of strategy, Haskins thought of torque and traction. Detroit Arsenal Production Memo, 1943. His story echoed a wider truth about the Allied war machine. It wasn't just technology that turned the tide. It was adaptation. Soldiers in the field were forced to outthink opponents who had superior hardware. The Allies won not because their tanks were invincible, but because their mechanics refused to accept defeat. War Department Analysis, 1946. On the third day, Black Betty led a flanking assault near the hamlet of Le Désert. Haskins' crew destroyed 2 Panthers before dawn. The third scored a hit that cracked Betty's right tread and jammed the turret. Still, Haskins refused to abandon her. He climbed out under fire, wrench in hand, hammering at the jammed link until it moved. When asked later why he risked his life for a machine, he shrugged. "She's all we've got between us and hell." Personal diary, Sergeant W. Reeve, dramatized composite. When St. Lo finally fell on July 19th, Black Betty stood battered but unbroken on a ridge overlooking the town. Shell holes pocked her sides, smoke curled from her engine vents, but her flag still fluttered. The crew had survived. Haskins, face streaked with oil and exhaustion, leaned against her hull. Around him other tanks smoldered, twisted and silent. His was the only one that made it through intact. Combat Command B Dispatch, July 1944. That day the legend began to spread far beyond the unit. In canteens, repair shops, and field hospitals, men told the tale of a mad mechanic who had built a tank that wouldn't die. Some dismissed it as myth, a morale tale. Others swore they saw the monster themselves, patched in blackened steel, grinning under its skull emblem. Stars and Stripes, Aug. 1944. But what few realized then was that Black Betty was more than a battlefield oddity. She represented something deeper, an awakening of engineering ingenuity under the pressure of total war. Haskins had unknowingly set a precedent. Within weeks, field modification reports circulated up the chain. Army ordnance officers took notes. New armor kits were discussed. A legend had turned into a prototype. U.S. Ordnance Evaluation Memo, 1944. And yet, as night fell over the battered ridges of St. Lo, Haskins was already back under his tank, tightening bolts in the flicker of his lantern. He didn't care about legends or reports. The war wasn't over. The next push would come soon. Somewhere ahead, more Panthers waited in the mist. His monster had survived one battle, but would it survive the war? U.S. Armored Command Forward Operations Log, July 1944. The smell of hot oil and scorched metal clung to the dawn air as Black Betty rumbled east of St. Lo. July 22, 1944. Her armor bore scars like medals, each dent a testament to survival, each patch a memory of battle. Inside, Corporal Raymond Red Haskins sat hunched over the controls, his face pale under the green glow of dashboard lamps. Outside, the rain had begun again, turning the churned earth into a slick brown sea. The war was moving fast now. Patton's Third Army was preparing to burst through the German lines, and every tank, no matter how battered, was needed. Haskins' creation was no longer an oddity. It was a symbol of defiance. U.S. 2nd Armored Division Log, July 1944. The Army called it a field modification. To Haskins, it was his life's work. He had fused together the wreckage of Allied and Axis machines into something unique. A Sherman tank that could take a Panther's punch and hit back hard. His modifications spread through the ranks like wildfire. Within a week, engineers in nearby battalions began copying his method. Bolting spare tracks onto glacis plates, welding extra armor skirts, even salvaging German optics from abandoned vehicles. Technical Manual TM 9731A, 1944, but Black Betty still had one flaw, her gun. The original 75 mm M3 cannon was outclassed. Against the thick hide of a panther or tiger, it was like throwing stones at a fortress. Haskins knew that if his machine was to survive what lay ahead, she needed new teeth. He found his answer in a wrecked M10 tank destroyer half-buried near Pontebert. Its long 3-inch M7 gun was intact. With help from 2 grease-stained engineers, Private Leo Mendez from Detroit and Corporal Alan Cho, a machinist from California, they spent 40 sleepless hours cutting, fitting, and welding the gun onto the Sherman's turret ring. Ordnance Modification Report, Normandy Workshop, 1944. The new weapon weighed nearly 1,800 pounds and required reinforced recoil cylinders scavenged from the M10's frame. They rebalanced the turret with counterweights made of Panther drive sprockets and broken tread links. The crew joked it looked like a tank built by lunatics, but when they test-fired it into a wrecked farmhouse, the shell tore through both walls and detonated a mile beyond. The ground shook. Haskins grinned, whispering, "Now she bites." Bureau of Ordnance Testing Memo, July 1944. That bite would be tested soon enough. By late July, Operation Cobra was in motion. The Allies unleashed over 3,000 aircraft, turning German positions near St. Lo into a sea of craters. The 2nd Armored Division, reinforced and ready, advanced into the shattered corridor. Haskins' crew, Sergeant Reeve, gunner, Piet Mendez, loader, and Cho, mechanic, moved at the spearhead. U.S. Army Field Report, Operation Cobra, 1944. The Germans had dug in along Hill 91, a ridge overlooking the Coutances Road. Panthers lay camouflaged in the tree lines, supported by anti-tank guns and Nebelwerfer rockets. When Black Betty crested the ridge, the enemy opened fire. A shell struck the lower glacis, gouging deep, but failing to penetrate. Haskins swung the turret, his new gun barked. The shot hit a Panther square on its turret ring, blowing it apart in a flash of orange fire. The crew could feel the concussion through their boots. Bundesarchiv, Panzerlehrdivision combat record. German commanders were stunned. Their report spoke of a heavily armored Sherman with a long gun, impervious to frontal attack. Some claimed it was a new Allied prototype, others a British Firefly. One officer wrote, "Our gunners report the enemy's tanks have changed. We can no longer trust our advantage." Dramatized composite. German Army Signals File, 1944. Technically, they were right. The Black Betty was no longer a standard M4A1. Her reinforced armor now exceeded 4 inches at the nose with layered steel and track sections. Her 3-inch gun could penetrate 100 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters, enough to challenge even a Tiger I under the right conditions. The modifications had transformed her into something between a Sherman and a tank destroyer. A one-off hybrid born not in a factory, but in the crucible of desperation. U.S. Ordnance Technical Evaluation, 1945. Behind the scenes, Allied engineers were taking notice. Reports of the Haskins conversion reached Ordnance HQ. Photos and field sketches circulated through maintenance depots in Normandy. Lieutenant Colonel Earl T. Winfield, an ordnance officer, remarked, "This is precisely the kind of innovation we need. Real-time adaptation under combat stress." Ordnance Division Memorandum, August 1944. As Cobra expanded, Haskins' crew pushed deeper into the bocage, supporting infantry under constant fire. Each engagement revealed new flaws and new fixes. When the engine overheated, Cho modified the air intakes using mesh from a destroyed Panther. When the left suspension failed, Mendez reforged a bogie arm from scrap iron. They worked by lantern light, hands raw, uniforms soaked with oil. Theirs was a machine that demanded blood as much as fuel. Field Workshop Log, 2nd Armored Maintenance Section. In one harrowing encounter near Cannacy, Black Betty faced off against a Tiger Voer, hidden behind a hedgerow at just 600 meters. The first German shell tore through a neighboring Sherman, sending its turret skyward. Haskins didn't flinch. He barked for range, elevated the gun, and fired. The 3-inch round punched through the Tiger's lower plate, igniting its ammunition. Flames erupted through the commander's hatch. Reeve later said, "It felt like the devil himself was fighting for us." After-action report, 2nd Armored Division. As victories mounted, disbelief turned to respect. Infantrymen began using Black Betty as cover during assaults. Tankers from other units came to study her modifications. Some sketched her armor layout in notebooks. For every improvised machine born in those fields, Haskins' work served as blueprint and inspiration. U.S. Armored Bulletin, Sept. 1944. Yet the toll was immense. Each battle pushed the crew and machine to the limit. The reinforced hull weighed over 37 tons, straining the original Ford GAA engine to near failure. Top speed dropped from 25 mph to barely 15. Fuel consumption soared. But what she lost in mobility, she gained in resilience. In 1 week, Black Betty survived 12 confirmed hits that would have destroyed any normal Sherman. Technical summary, 2nd Armored Ordnance Section. What truly set her apart, though, wasn't the steel. It was the human bond within. The men treated her as a living being. They talked to her, thanked her after each fight, cursed her when bolts sheared. "You don't just drive a tank like this," Mendez said later. "You keep it alive." Veterans Oral History Project, 1946. German intelligence soon reported sightings of a monster tank leading American assaults, dubbing it Der Teufelpanzer, the Devil tank. Some Wehrmacht units were ordered to prioritize its destruction, but none succeeded. Even when artillery blanketed the roads near Percy, Black Betty emerged from the smoke, her armor blackened, her guns still roaring. German Army Group B Field Report, July 1944, by mid-August. As Patton's forces broke into the open country beyond Avranches, the legend of the Mad Mechanic had spread all the way to Allied headquarters. Correspondents wanted interviews, commanders wanted statistics. Haskins, however, kept to his tools. He refused promotion, refused medals. When asked why, he simply said, "The tank's the hero, not me." Stars and Stripes, Aug. 1944. His unorthodox machine now stood as proof that ingenuity could outfight superiority. Every weld and bolt told a story of adaptation. American factories could build thousands of tanks, but it took one mad mechanic to remind the world that machines could evolve on the battlefield itself. U.S. Strategic Technical Report, 1946. As August turned to September, Haskins and Black Betty prepared for their next mission, a push into Belgium, where rumors of new German armor, something faster, stronger, and deadlier, were spreading through Allied briefings. Haskins ran a hand over his tank's dented flank, whispering to her like an old friend. "You've beaten their beasts before," he said. "Let's see what they bring next." The crew climbed aboard. The engine coughed, then growled to life, shaking mud from her tracks. In the distance, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from tanks massing for another advance. What neither Haskins nor his crew knew was that Black Betty would soon face her greatest test yet. A confrontation that would pit their hand-forged creation against the newest terror of the German war machine, and decide whether one man's genius could defy an empire's engineering. U.S. Armored Command Forward Log, August 1944. The wind was sharp over the Belgian plain on September 3, 1944, carrying the distant thunder of artillery and the cold scent of burning fuel. Black Betty rolled through the outskirts of Mons, her armor layered with grime and glory, her crew hollow-eyed from endless fighting. The war had entered a new phase, faster, fiercer, more uncertain. The German army, though battered, was far from beaten. Retreating columns still fought with desperate precision, and among the chaos, a new predator had appeared on the horizon, the Panther Ausf. Faster, deadlier, and fitted with improved optics and sloped armor. U.S. Army Operations Report, Sept. 1944. By now, Haskins's improvised tank had become a symbol. Soldiers touched her hull for luck. Mechanics from other units took notes and photos, documenting the modifications that had turned a wreck into a weapon of legend. The Ordnance Corps even considered duplicating the design in limited numbers, labeling it M4 Hybrid Assault Variant, Haskins type. But there was no time for production. The front was fluid, and Haskins was still in the fight. Ordnance Proposal Draft, Sept. 1944, at dawn. The 2nd Armored Division advanced toward the Belgian border, chasing remnants of the German 5th Panzer Army. The fields were slick with dew, the roads choked with fleeing vehicles. Black Betty moved in the vanguard, her crew scanning the tree lines for ambushes. The radio crackled with fragments of chaos, reports of Tigers re-engaging near Tournai, minefields on the secondary roads, and rumors of an ambush ahead. Haskins, ever calm, leaned into the periscope. "Let's keep rolling," he muttered. "They'll hit us when they're ready." Signal Course Radio Log, Sept. 1944. At 0940 hours, the trap was sprung. From a copse of trees, 2 Panther Gs opened fire simultaneously. The first shell tore through the lead Sherman, detonating its ammo rack in a column of smoke. The second screamed toward Black Betty. It struck her right flank, denting but not penetrating, her welded Panther sprockets acting as makeshift spaced armor. Inside, the crew was thrown hard against the walls. Sparks rained from the ceiling. "Return fire!" shouted Haskins. The gun roared, the recoil slamming through the turret like a sledgehammer. The shell clipped a Panther's mantlet, ricocheted, then struck its commander's hatch. The tank went up in flames. Bundesarchiv Panzerlehr Action Report. The 2nd German machine advanced, pivoting to flank. Haskins gunned the engine, churning mud and smoke. Black Betty lurched forward, closing the gap to just 300 yards, suicidal range for a Sherman. But Haskins wasn't thinking of doctrine. He was thinking like a mechanic, like a predator that knew the weak spots. "Aim for the lower plate," he ordered. Reeve adjusted, fired. The round struck true. The Panther staggered, then exploded, its turret blowing clear of the hull. U.S. Armored Division Engagement Summary, Sept. 1944. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was silent, save for the ticking of cooling steel. Infantry advanced behind Black Betty, passing the burning wrecks with awe. Some saluted the tank as if it were a living creature. Others whispered that Haskins had made a deal with death itself. The name Mad Mechanic stuck for good that day. Eyewitness account, Prift H. Lewis. But the victory had cost them dearly. Betty's engine was failing. The reinforced hull, now weighing nearly 40 tons, had cracked a rear suspension mount. Fuel lines leaked, oil pressure dropped, and the turret ring groaned with every rotation. Haskins and Cho spent 2 nights beneath her chassis, welding by flashlight, patching with stolen German parts. "We've rebuilt her twice," Cho murmured. "But she keeps wanting more." Haskins only smiled. "Then we keep giving." Field repair log, 2nd Armored Maintenance, Sept, 1944. Behind the front lines, Allied intelligence analysts began documenting the phenomenon of combat innovation. Reports from Normandy to Belgium showed a pattern. Frontline soldiers were modifying tanks faster than factories could deliver upgrades. One British report praised Haskins' work as a demonstration of mechanical genius under duress, comparable to naval field repairs at sea. Allied Technical Liaison Summary, OCT 1944. Even the Germans took note. Interrogations of captured officers revealed genuine confusion. "We believed the Sherman was weak," one colonel admitted, "but it changed. It became stronger each week. We could not understand how." U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, German Armaments Interviews, 1946. Black Betty continued through the autumn, fighting across Belgium and into Luxembourg. The terrain shifted from open fields to dense forests. Every bend threatened mines or ambush. Rain turned roads into rivers of mud. Yet the tank kept going, patched, re-welded, sustained by willpower and adrenaline. Combat Command B Journal, Oct. 1944. Then came December 16, 1944, the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. The Ardennes erupted in chaos as German armor surged west through snow and fog. Haskins' crew, now veterans of 4 campaigns, were pulled from reserve to plug a collapsing line near Bastogne. Temperatures plunged below freezing. Ice coated the hull, the gun jammed, and fuel was scarce. "If she starts," Mendez said through chattering teeth, "she'll fight." They cranked the engine again and again until the GAA sputtered to life, coughing blue smoke. U.S. 2nd Armored Winter Report, Dec 1944. At Bastogne's southern perimeter, Black Betty faced her most desperate fight. German King Tigers, armored monsters weighing over 68 tons, rolled out of the woods. Their 88mm K-43 guns could kill anything the Allies had. The air was filled with thunder, snow, and terror. Haskins knew his tank couldn't outgun them. But maybe, just maybe, it could outthink them. He ordered smoke shells fired, masking their movement. Using terrain and sleet, they circled to flank a Tiger bogged in a ditch. At point-blank range, the 3-inch gun fired. The shell punched through the Tiger's rear armor, flames blossoming from its vents. Bastogne Combat Report, Dec 1944. They destroyed 2 more before their ammunition ran dry. When the final round was fired, Haskins rammed a German half-track, crushing it under Betty's treads. The radio went dead, tracks frozen stiff, the machine shaking apart from fatigue. "She's done," Cho whispered. Haskins looked at his creation, steam rising from the engine deck like breath from a dying beast. "Then we've done enough," he said. Veterans Account, 1946. When the snow cleared, Black Betty lay half-buried in ice outside Bastogne. The crew survived, evacuated by medics. Haskins stayed behind for 3 more days, refusing to leave until she was safe from capture. Eventually, she was towed back to a depot near Liège. Mechanics gathered around her wrecked frame, touching the scars as if reading scripture. Ordnance Salvage Report, Jan 1945. The war would soon end, but the legend of Black Betty would not. Engineers from the Detroit Arsenal studied her remains in early 1945, noting her welded armor layers, turret adaptations, and custom counterweights. Many of her design principles, modular armor, field-adaptable mounts, hybrid chassis, would echo in later tank development, influencing the M26 Pershing and post-war prototypes that evolved into the M46 Patton. Detroit Arsenal Technical Evaluation, 1945. Psychologists studying combat morale later cited Haskins's story as a case study in creative defiance under stress. For frontline soldiers, his tank embodied the idea that courage could be engineered, that a man with a wrench could challenge an empire built on precision. U.S. Army Psychological Warfare Assessment, 1946. In the years that followed, Haskins returned to his farm in Iowa. He refused interviews, medals, or commendations. When a reporter finally found him in 1952, he was fixing a broken tractor. Asked about the war, he simply said, "Machines don't win wars. Men who refuse to quit do." Des Moines Register interview, 1952. The wreck of Black Betty was eventually scrapped, yet fragments of her armor were kept by her crew. One piece welded into a barn door hinge, another fashioned into a paperweight, another buried under an oak tree on the Haskins farm. Decades later, a single bolt from her hull was displayed at the U.S. Armor Museum. Fort Moore, labeled simply Field Innovation. Normandy-Bastogne, 1944. Museum Catalog Entry, 1987. Her story became legend not because she was indestructible, but because she represented the spirit of soldiers and engineers who refused to accept limitation. She was the machine that should not have existed, the monster born from wreckage and rage. And she proved that sometimes, in the darkest moments of war, madness is just another name for genius. U.S. Strategic History Program, 1954. And as historians look back on that savage summer of 1944, they still whisper her name with reverence. Not as a myth, but as a message. That in modern war, adaptation is the true armor, and defiance, the deadliest weapon of all.